I only picked up my phone for a few minutes before going to bed. Somehow, I put it down feeling as if something had quietly slipped away from me. A mother about my age smiled in front of her new house. The caption underneath read, "Finally debt-free at 34. I kept scrolling. Emergency savings for 6 months, an investment portfolio, and a family vacation to Europe filled the screen one after another. There was nothing wrong with any of it. Even so, my chest felt a little heavier each time the screen moved downward. I looked over at the dining table, still covered with our weekly grocery list. My name's Clara, and that was the night I first felt like our family was falling behind. The next morning, I went through this week's grocery budget again. The price of milk had gone up by a few dollars once more. I shifted a few numbers in my little notebook. I trimmed the fruit budget just enough to keep everything within the limit. Armand packed Mira's lunch while quietly whistling to himself. Our home felt as ordinary as it always did. Myra asked if we could visit the aquarium during our vacation. I smiled and simply said, "We'll see." That afternoon, I opened social media again. Someone was celebrating their first $100,000 in savings. I closed the app sooner than usual. Even so, that number stayed with me long after the screen went dark. That night, I looked at our family's savings account. For the first time, the balance felt smaller than it had before. I started noticing a quiet change in the way I thought. I was comparing numbers more often than feeling thankful for what we already had. Every automatic transfer reached our savings just as planned. Instead of relief, all I could think was, we're still far away. I tried to ignore the feeling and keep moving through the day. Maybe I was simply tired. A few days later, another post caught my attention. This time it was about a family paying off their home ahead of schedule. I began wondering if we had been doing something wrong, even though our life was actually going just fine. Armand noticed I had been staring at the screen for quite a while. He gently asked if something was wrong. I answered quickly, "Nothing." For a little while, I believed that answer myself. I caught myself calculating our age. Then I quietly compared it with the people I kept seeing on my screen. Before long, I was comparing our savings. After that, I started measuring our income too. Then it became our house. Even our cars started feeling like something to compare. Without realizing it, I was comparing every part of our life, all against small pieces of someone else's. Nothing extra was leaving our bank account. Even so, I somehow felt poorer every day. I slowly stopped feeling proud of the small progress we had made. Those little steps used to mean so much to me. I don't know when feeling content quietly turned into feeling behind. It happened so gradually that I barely noticed. It was a quiet Saturday morning, and we shared pancakes around the kitchen table. Mira laughed as a ribbon of syrup slipped onto the tabletop. Our man worked on the loose bookshelf while I watered the plants outside. It felt like another ordinary part of our weekend. There were no arguments waiting for us that day. Nothing important had gone wrong. But whenever I looked at our house, my eyes went to everything we still didn't have. I stopped noticing everything we had already built together. I started feeling like I had failed, even though I couldn't explain why. The feeling stayed with me without becoming any clearer. I still cooked dinner that evening. I still sat beside Mira while she finished her homework. From the outside, everything still looked perfectly normal. Inside, I was getting tired of running in a race I had never chosen. That evening, I opened my savings account again. Mira sat beside me, quietly drawing while I looked at the numbers on my phone. She glanced at the number on my screen. Then she quietly asked, "Mom, are we poor?" I turned toward her right away. "Why would you think that, Mira?" She pointed to the large house photo that was still open on my screen. "Because our house doesn't look like that." I stayed silent for a few moments. I didn't know when my feelings had become visible to my daughter. Myra quietly went back to her drawing. She sketched a small house with 3 smiling people standing in front of it. "This is our house," she said. For some reason, I felt my eyes begin to fill with tears. I didn't go to bed right away that night. I stayed at the kitchen table, quietly sitting with my thoughts. An uncomfortable thought settled in. I realized I wasn't actually chasing security. I had been chasing the feeling that I wasn't falling behind. I realized those were not the same thing. I didn't know how much debt they carried. I didn't know what they had struggled through. I didn't know where they had started. I didn't know what weight they were carrying. Even so, I kept comparing all of it with our life, as if we had started from the same place. Maybe we had been running on different paths from the very beginning. That thought stayed quietly with me. The following evening, I finally told Armand everything that had been sitting in my mind. I wasn't talking about money this time, but about how I had been feeling. I feel like we're falling behind, I admitted at last. Saying the words out loud felt unfamiliar. Armand stayed quiet for a moment before looking at me. Then he simply asked, "Behind who?" I couldn't answer right away. The truth was, I didn't even know who I'd been comparing us to. Armand smiled a little. He reminded me that we now had savings we once never imagined having. He brought up our first years of marriage. Back then, even $100 set aside felt like a real victory. I smiled quietly. For a moment, I realized I had almost forgotten how far we had already come. The following week, I decided to try something different. I quietly called it my personal baseline. I stopped asking who was farther ahead. Instead, I began asking whether we were doing better than last year. The answer was yes. Realizing that felt surprisingly calming. We had an emergency fund that didn't exist before. We had built saving habits that once weren't part of our lives. We still had a long way to go. Even so, there were already reasons to feel proud today. I began looking at our savings differently. They no longer felt like proof of what we lacked. I started seeing it as proof of our journey instead. Journeys simply take time. I finally understood something simple. Someone else's pace was never proof that I was falling behind. Every family begins from a different place. Every family carries a different weight that no one else can fully see. A small savings account is still real savings. Small progress is still progress. If our little story feels familiar to you, maybe you're not as alone as you thought. I'd be happy if you joined us for the next chapter in Clara's family journal. Now, I'd like to ask you something. What's one financial goal you're working toward for yourself, without worrying about what anyone else has achieved?